We meet again on the subject of the power of more comprehensive nutrition. And I'd like to stress again the importance that there is no activity that humans have that are more personal and more in your control to practice your liberty and freedom in regard to what you eat, your choices, and the amount you eat. Also, one of the reasons so much time is being spent on this is try to inform you so that you will know the incredible power that is endowed in our genetic code that controls cellular synthesis of how amino acids, fatty acids, sugar units or saccharides, vitamins, minerals, elements, and plant phytonutrients are hooked together in cellular synthesis under the control of the genes to make bioactive molecules that run the normal biochemistry and physiology of life. And I will repeatedly emphasize normal because it's against federal law for anything other than a FDA-approved prescription drug to treat, cure, or mitigate disease or syndromes or correct an abnormal health condition. All we're talking about is normal, more comprehensive nutrition to support the biochemistry and physiology of the body. And you knowing this is important because we have a brain between our ears of each one of us, and its function is the mind. And the mind controls through the nervous system and the hormones and possibly other factors we don't even know about, everything in the human body. So what you think and believe and know is extremely important. And if you understand the power of more optimal nutrition, I call this translation into daily living, it's personal, preventive, and interventional health management. And in this day of runaway inflation, governments interfering more and more with personal activities and choices, this becomes increasingly important as the family's finances, the personal finances of being able to prevent disease, to support the recovery of deviations from health, which I will note in this at one point, is in the preamble to the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of '94, which in the preamble states that science and medicine has observed and proven that optimal nutrition is essential for good health, to prevent disease, and to restore health. You might immediately ask, well, what more would you want? Well, I can tell you exactly what you'd want. You would like for that statement to be in the law and not in the preamble, which is not the law, but we'll proceed further with this presentation that I call the Pottenger cat experiment. And it's about the importance of having raw food in your diet that is not deteriorated by cooking, which introduces oxidation into all nutrient molecules, which is accelerated rancidity. Everyone knows what rancid butter or rancid peanut butter or mayonnaise is. Well, that's oxidation in this 21% oxygen atmosphere, and heat increases that rate. And bioactive molecules are more active when they are raw and have kept away from heat. So we'll proceed to the PowerPoint presentation now. This first slide, you will see some green, and that's the emphasis of this lecture. Raw food, and I emphasize it supports normal biochemistry of life. And again, normal again is emphasized. And we will start out that saying that my email is capital R McDaniel at wellnessquest.org. And if you have questions that arise from these lectures, I will do my best to respond to any email you send to me. And I also have some material that I can send to you that addresses personal issues that you find that you want some response to. I'll do my best. Now, I want to start out by talking about freeze drying. That's where you put a substance in a vessel or container, which is at freezing temperature, and you put a vacuum on it to remove the water. When you remove water, all moisture, the natural potentials of these complex natural molecules are preserved. What do we mean? This was developed in the 1930s to preserve enzyme bioactivity, removing the water in the cold. And they also then found that the bioactivity of compounds of life that are used in biochemical research, this bioactivity was preserved. And of course, biochemical research or molecular biology is how do living cells work. And it was found long ago that individual plant cells and animal cells have very similar biochemical metabolic activities. And freeze drying was developed onto a commercial scale to produce plant-made nutrient molecules or phytonutrients, ingredients for dietary supplement formulations. The plant powders or biological activity are preserved and can enter into normal biochemistry of life processes. The phytonutrients and other nutrient molecules have a critical metabolic structure that imparts metabolic activity that is produced by the assembly of nutrient molecules in cellular synthesis. And of course, this cellular synthesis is controlled by genes, and it's a DNA nucleic acid code written in 4 complex molecules: adenine for A, cytosine for C, guanine for G, and T for thymidine, that in chains are a instructional code for organelles of the assembly line that's present in every cell. Every cell is like a tiny ultramicroscopic factory, and depending on which gene is activated, of the 30,000 genes, that is the bioactive compound that's made that conducts the normal biochemistry of life. And I'll emphasize again, normal, not treated. You should know that the DNA code made by these 4 nucleic acids is far more powerful than computer code in computers like desktops, laptops, and cell phones. In this session, we will emphasize the importance of maintaining enzyme bioactivity that is in nutrient molecules. This was experience I'm going to share with you, show how nutrients are devitalized by heat in our 21% oxygen atmosphere. And this impacts the animal health as demonstrated by cats that are omnivorous mammals, because humans are not only eat meat, but vegetables, and cats will do much of the same. And their metabolism is greatly alike. And also these experiments done by Dr. Potter, it was his name, from the Potter Price Foundation, was the first to exhibit the phenomenon of epigenetics. In what I will share with you, the genes in group A cats and the genes in group B cats are identical. The difference is the marked difference that group A has raw food and group B has thoroughly cooked food. Now, there is a remarkable parallel and similarity of biochemical cascades in all animal cells, and there are some differences too. It should be known that the DNA in plant cells, and nucleic acid in plant cells, is identical to the DNA in animal and human cells. This is a challenge for anyone that has the attitude that all life, plant and animal, just came about by totally inanimate or no properties of life molecules, just getting excited and deciding to get organized and establish life. If there was some type of intelligence that developed plant cells, why do it all over again? And the DNA or the code in plant cells that control its activity is identical to that of animals and humans. And I might add that the trend is to do more research on cell cultures of animal organ cells rather than the intact living cells. If you've been following the research on animals, there's a growing appreciation for the emotional and mental life that is present in what was once thought totally stupid or dumb animals. They're far from dumb, and the current issue of National Geographic goes into this a little further than it's been done in the past. And a plant like a tree or a human being has trillions of cells that have to function in harmony. And the cell cultures can mimic some of the biochemistry, but they cannot encompass all the complexity of the human condition. We'll go to the next slide. Now, this is the book called Pottinger's Cats that is in the Price-Pottenger Foundation out of California. And I want to refer you to, if you go to that website, they have a DVD about this research that I found not only very informative, but chilling in regard to the lack of understanding of the power of nutrition that is absent in our population. Now, Dr. Price was a dentist, and he has been regarded by those that follow him as the Charles Darwin of nutrition. And he was born in Canada, and he did extensive research for the Dental Association of Canada and the United States. And he became, by his findings in nutrition, virtually an evangelist, and skeptics really attacked him for his devotion and research done on the importance of nutrition in human health. He wrote books, and he developed a belief that a lot of disease came from teeth without pulp in them, or they were devitalized, a source for toxicity to the body and poor health. That also the tonsils were important in this, and they should be healthy. And he developed endodontia, or root canal procedures, and he received a lot of criticism. But Dr. Price was a pioneer in dental work and the use of radiology and x-rays on oral structure of teeth and jaws, and we see the years that he lived at the bottom. Important about his role at the Price-Pottenger Foundation, as a young dentist in the 1920s and 30s, he must have been from a family of some substance, because he took a world tour once he got his dental degree. and he collected over 15,000 photographs of the oral status of third world populations that were pre-industrial. Then after retirement as a dentist, he went on a second world tour, and from that he developed pictures that he believed proved that the adoption of Western diets in these previously undeveloped countries was deleterious to the dental and jaw health of these people. And he wrote a book in 1939, Nutrition and Physical Deterioration, the relationship between diet, that he pointed out that Western governments and nonprofits and religious organizations brought Western diets into these third world countries, and it was deleterious. The source of his information was in Switzerland and Native American tribes. He went into Polynesia and African groups, Australian Aboriginals, and he initially showed the normal dentition and the lack of caries, particularly, and normal relationship between the mandible and the maxilla in these indigenous populations on their basic natural diets. And in his second trip, he was able to show that by adoption of Western diets, that you saw bone deformities of the skull, and the teeth had no room for properly being developed, and there were rampant caries in the tooth. And for all of this in his book, in his conclusion, he was attacked vigorously by multiple sources. And of course, that's kind of a modern parallel to many things that goes on in this day. He believed that processed wheat flour that beat in sugarcane sweetener and all processed fruits, vegetables, and meats and vegetable oils were deleterious to health. And in modern research, his targeting the sucrose that is from cane and beet extract of the sweetener has been shown that he was well, shall we say, knew what he was talking about, because the molecule of sucrose, that is table sugar from cane and beets, is a disaccharide that combines glucose attached to another sugar, fructose. And that glucose, in experiments done in the modern era, are non-diabetogenic. They do not elevate the blood glucose in individuals that are fed large amounts of glucose. If you give them sucrose, which is a combination of glucose and fructose, you find it's mildly diabetogenic, moderate at most. And this is done by not only blood glucose levels, but by insulin and pre-insulin forming compounds to follow the diabetic influence. But fructose alone given to human being is very diabetogenic and will induce poor glucose control and insulin resistance and damage to the endothelial cells in the retina of the eye and the brain and the heart and the kidneys. And fructose is very deleterious, and there's a lot of current public protests about pure corn source fructose, which is the absolute cheapest sweetener that's available commercial for different companies to put in all types of food that is processed food is very diabetogenic. We're going to emphasize in this thing that cooking in the 21% atmosphere of oxygen accelerates oxidation, or the oxygen molecule attaching to molecules. And this oxidation, you know more about than you think you do, because if you don't eat it, you just keep it around, a mayonnaise or natural butter or peanut butter becomes rancid, and that's the natural attachment of oxygen molecules from the 21% atmosphere. And this type of process goes on inside our body. But with the beautiful design and function of life, the genes make molecules that reverse oxidation and turn and contribute electrons back to make it in a reduced form. And that's what is present in raw food, is it's not oxidized, and we'll proceed further. Now, Dr. Pottenger was a general surgeon in the pre-antibiotic period, and this was a treacherous era for surgeons because they violated by cutting through the skin, which is its number one role is to protect all the cells and fluids and compounds in the body from infection. And during the pre-antibiotic era, and particularly prolonged surgical procedures or major surgicals, death just due from surgery and the infection that was produced was significant. Well, Dr. Pottenger observed in his practice that there were patients that before the surgery, in his examination, everything that he could detect, all looked identical. However, after surgery, they could divide it into two groups. Now, one group recuperated, healed rapidly with no complications. Now, this is what surgeons want. And I worked for decades with surgeons, and they see themselves as kind of like a knight in shining armor with their banner held high, and they come in and people are in pain or disability. They correct the problem and they ride off into the sunset a hero. That's what surgeons want. No complications. Now, the group two were a surgeon's nightmare. It's something they hate to see. Multiple problems. The wounds came apart before they went into the skin. It's called dehiscence. The sutures don't hold and heal. Infections spread not only topically, but even locally into the blood to be septicemia. They developed post-surgical adhesions or fibrous bands. They had either bulging, hypertrophic, or very weak hernia scars when they did invasion of the chest and abdomen. These patients recovered poorly from the anesthesia, which is a toxic assault on the body to paralyze and put the mind at rest while the surgeon does his work. Also, from anesthesia, you can have a bowel that doesn't wake up after surgery. It's called ileus. And there are a lot of problems from ileus of sequestration of fluid in segments, and the peristalsis is not restored. The lungs can develop pneumonia, and there can be progressive disabilities, even deaths from patients that look before surgery just identical to group one. But Dr. Pottenger was challenged by these two groups, and in very detailed examination of them, he decided he believed it was due to the pre-surgical nutrition of the patients, determine whether they're in group one or group two. And he decided he would do research to look into this, and that's what's called the history of Pottenger's cats. Now, he did a 10-year research program between 1932 and 1942. He set up 2 identical cat colony enclosures with shelter and an open run pen so they could get outside. Group A colony had everything they eat was raw, just as it would find in nature. Group B cats said everything they eat was really cooked well and processed by heat. Over the decades, multiple different permutations of the diet were given to Group B, which we'll go into a little more later. Well, bottom line was Group B cats died out in the 3rd to 4th generations due to progressive poor health by more members of the colony. Group A multiplied until he had too many cats on his hands. In the permutations of the diet, he found out ultimately that 50% of the food by the cats in Group B were raw, that the cats, being a carnivorous model, prospered just like the Group A cats that had totally raw. In other words, Group B, if 50% of their intake was raw and unoxidized by heat, that the cats prospered and reproduced and were healthy. We'll go into some details of this. Now, Group A had 2/3 raw meat, 1/3 raw cow's milk, plus cod liver oil. Group B had 2/3 absolutely totally cooked meat, heated and pasteurized milk, but also cod liver oil to add to their diet, fatty oils. And the big difference was the raw meat and milk and the cooked meat and heated milk. That the 2 groups of cats initially were physically evaluated and put through a performance task, and they were, as far as they could tell, they were identical. One of the things they did with the cats is they weighed them, measured them. They would take them up in the air at different positions and drop them for 6 feet and see if they could twist around and land on their feet, which a good cat in good health can do. They recorded the nature of their fur, their eyes, their teeth, and mouth membranes. And before they started this, they were all within normal range for both Group A and Group B, just like his surgical patients that led to doing this experiment. Now, in the Group A, he fed them liver, brain, tripe, sweetbreads, heart, skeletal, and smooth muscles. And the cats propagated, had litters. They followed their size of not only the cats, but of their litters. And they all were considered normal cats. And the offspring of these cats was an average of 119 grams. Now, of the cooked meat and cooked heated milk group that initially started out looking identical, just like the surgical patients, very rapidly they became sterile and they became hostile to handling, and they were hostile to each other. They noticed aberrant sexual activity. They became reduced in size. The animals, they had scruffy fur, unhealthy mouth, gums, and teeth. Their bones were longer and smaller in diameter. The bones were rubbery compared to the Group A thing, and they had more fractures. Their offspring of their litters were 19 grams less than the raw food cats. In other words, they were smaller little litter cats. They had more deformities. And as we said before, group A multiplied, were in good health, you got too many cats eventually. By the third and fourth generation, the cats were having a shorter lifespan. They had spontaneous abortions, stillbirths, sterile colony died out. And the incidence of genetic deformities increased with each generation. And I put an asterisk at these deformities because in our own personal experience at Carrington Laboratories and at the International Dietary Supplement Company for 10 years, we had a veterinarian breeder with 100 female greyhounds that he raised greyhounds for the dog racing tracks. He added the aloes mannin to their basic diets of these 100 female greyhounds, and he reported he eliminated runts and litter, which had been common. He eliminated genetic deformities of all forms, and the incidence of neonatal deaths just disappeared. The baby animals grew faster. They were easier to train, and they found out they were particularly calm because the greyhounds, by their nature, were pretty nervous and easily upset by travel in the way you have to travel from track to track. And in fact, the greyhounds that developed were faster racers. They could set new records for the distance they were running. Well, that's with these greyhounds reported by this veterinary breeder. But it's an interesting story that we had anecdotal reports that I received as director for a dietary supplement company that this was repeated in racehorses, and that in Canada, I met with a coach up there that he had Olympian sprinter females, and that they broke records by adding this oligosaccharide to their diet. And then in addition, he was a consultant to a group of males in their 35, 45 age range in Ottawa that had been Olympians or World Cup competitors. And he was amazed that at the age of 35 to 45, they were breaking records they set when they were 18 to 21. Then, before it was over with, I was the medical director for Manna Relief Ministries, and unsolicited, we got reports that not only did children with chronic malaria quit having fever, chills, and red cell destruction and began to grow again, got out of bed, and went back to school, but that they, in time, we got reports, again, unsolicited, that they exceeded in athletic performance with soccer with the other kids. So this is a recurrent observation anecdotally. Now, in addition, they took this cats, and they took this Greek B cats, and they used canned condensed milk, and they used canned condensed milk with sucrose from sugarcane or beet added as a fermentation of their diets. And they're doing this, they found out that sucrose was not desirable, and that diabetes developed especially sooner in this group B cats if sucrose was added to canned milk. His conclusions about all his tests was that raw food is 40 to 50% of the diet, which would be food as it occurs in nature's, that these carnivorous cats will have good health from generation to generation, just like the group A cats that got totally uncooked food. And so the lesson to each of us is that we should have salads and raw fruit and vegetables as much as possible to try to make a significant amount of our diet is uncooked food. Now, after the study was done with these cats, he still had the cat colony pens, which were about 12 by 6 by 7 feet. And they had a fence runway underneath the covered area, which kept them from bad weather. And in the future years, when they no longer had cats, they noted that the weeds were reduced in the number and even in the weeds size in the Group B cat colony sheltered run. And there was florid, intense weed growth in the Group A shelters, where the cats' urine and feces would go into the run, and the plants benefited from the Group A diets more than the Group D. They went even further and they plowed this ground, and they put grass seed in it, and even this cultivated growth was significantly better in the ground where the Group A cats lived compared to the plants that grew in the Group B run cats. The story is that cooking of food oxidizes or destroys, and that oxidize, for your common understanding, is more like rancid, the oxygen attaching to the molecules, that this oxidation destroys complex organic nutrient molecules, not even only for the cats, but even for plants. And that the complex molecular structure of natural vitamins and nutrients are superior to the cooking in our atmospheric of 21% atmosphere. And when you oxidize a molecule, it is no longer an electron donor. And that's a feature of natural vitamins and nutrient molecules. I recommend to you the Price-Pottenger Foundation video, and they present this history that I have been sharing with you. And not only Pottinger's experience, but Dr. Price's. But the video comes to, after telling you all this, to a final conclusion and commentary that I found a measure of chilling reality. What do I mean? They say, and I quote from the DVD, the American typical diet is resulting in the human population's health following the same path as the Group B cooked food cats. And why did I say this was a chilling reality? When I was a young doctor, there were no fertility clinics or medical specialists in this field. In fact, females feared getting pregnant too easy, but that's changed. And if you notice, that was one of the first things in Group B cats as they became sterile. That's why the colonies died out. Over these years, I've heard of fertility clinic failures. I think of a couple in Canada that went to 2 fertility clinics. They were a little older than the average couple, and they just could not get pregnant. However, they adopted this more comprehensive nutrition built around the oligosaccharide nutrients, and lo and behold, they had a twin boy and twin girl, and I can't tell you how happy and proud they were. We had examples of individuals that had been going to fertility sterile clinics where the male had sperm counts that were just too low to induce a pregnancy, and that with more comprehensive nutrition built around the allo-oligosaccharide, or the ingredients that are in New Eden, the sperm counts came up to normal levels and a pregnancy event occurred. Very happy couples. I shared with you that nutrition improved not only physical performance and athletics, but one of the biggest files I have on my computer is the improvement in academics, that even the function, biochemistry of the brain is improved by more comprehensive nutrition as provided by the ingredients that are in New Eden that I put together with these 36 years of experience. I might add, the reason this file on academics is so large is it is opposed by the agenda of the educational establishment. And there were multiple studies that some of them got published that rather than it would take significantly more tax money for multiple reasons that they would use it, that just by almost insignificant improvement in the nutritional content of children, that their grades and their behavior improved in a manner that was a threat to the education establishment, that said there's not going to be an improvement till we get more money. When I was an early physician, I was a hospital-based physician, and we would have one or two patients in the hospital in the 1960s that were diabetics being followed to try to improve their health and problems from type 2 diabetes. By the time I retired, in the 30 years later, we had two techs coming in at 5 o'clock in the morning to start drawing blood on the multiple diabetics. We might have 10 to 20 in the hospital, because when the doctors made rounds at say 8 or 9 o'clock, they wouldn't want to know what the AM glucose was to write the orders for their insulin and other diabetic pharmaceuticals. So we went from virtually no diabetics in the hospital to so many we had to bring in new technicians very early in the morning. Also, when I was in training, I will never forget, I had a patient that had an autoimmune disease, lupus. And the chief resident said, get that case prepared and present it to all the other students before the week's over at our review, because you may never see another case of lupus again. Well, what has happened over the years? Nearly everybody knows someone with lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or hypothyroidism due to autoantibody disease, which are the most common ones. And what has happened during this time? We've plowed up more gardens, chopped down more orchards. And I would say the chain that you see down in nearly every metropolis, French fried fast food has exploded, and that has increased in our diets, like the type B cats getting totally cooked food. Another thing that I have observed since the years that I've been a physician, that in the early years, there was no instance, nobody in the clinic, no, not in the lectures or in the textbooks, anything about attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity syndrome. However, now it's on the covers of magazines, and it's virtually a national youth epidemic. And I mention this because we were astounded when in Chicago, a study was done in a group of about 41 children that had ADD, ADHD, in just microscopic amounts of more comprehensive nutrition, these children's academic performance and behaviors markedly improved. So the legacy is that we have a lot to learn from Dr. Pottenger and Dr. Price, and that's why their foundation in California exists, to try to educate the public the importance of raw food in the diet. And they had the experience, they want to share Dr. Pottinger's experience that through epigenetic influence of the diet, because the group A and the group B cats had identical genes. What the difference was, even both of them got powdered liver oil, but the difference was the amount of cooked food they ate and its effect on genetic activity, on cellular synthesis, and the quality of life of the individual. And you can learn from this in regard to your personal diet for yourself and your family, and particularly your children. I might add that the truth of Dr. Pottinger's research, that he received hell on earth because the sickness industry, a lot of people don't know that Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance plans will not provide a fee to a health professional unless you can prove there is sickness by either x-rays, by lab work, or unquestionable examination. You got to have a disease present to be remunerated and paid for your professional activity. And that's why some people say it's not a health industry or profession in the United States, it's a sickness industry. Sure, cats are not humans, but there's so much similarity to the biochemistry of animals, and particularly cats and human beings. And there is a book called The China Study by a PhD author, Dr. Campbell, the biggest nutritional study that's ever been done, that was funded as a cooperation between China and the United States, and that the importance of the rice that we point out as ingredients, and also raw food, elevates health. I won't go into it, but I was present at a program from a retired FDA farmer individual life career, and he gave the evidence that the recommended daily allowances or recommendations in diet are not based on scientific data, but just on a premise that Americans are the best nutrition people in the world. They have nutrition so good that obesity is a problem. And it's not based on scientific facts. And there are some things that have been determined later that by increasing the amounts of, for example, folic acid, that the incidence of spina bifida have virtually been eliminated by increasing the vitamin in prenatal capsules above the initial recommended daily allowances. So the research of Dr. Pottinger should be taken into your mind as important, and to use this information to improve your personal and family health. With that, I will end this lecture and hope that you have got some new knowledge that you will apply and improve your health while decreasing healthcare costs.